Marcus Thompson had always been an early riser, but that Tuesday morning in October felt different somehow. The crisp mountain air carried an unusual silence as he stepped onto the porch of his cabin, coffee mug in hand. His 8-year-old daughter Emma was still sleeping peacefully inside, and he cherished these quiet moments before the day began. The single father had moved to this remote area of Colorado 2 years ago, seeking a fresh start after his wife Sarah's death in a car accident. The isolation suited him, providing the peace he needed to heal while raising Emma on his own. He worked as a freelance software developer, which allowed him the flexibility to be present for his daughter while maintaining their modest lifestyle. As Marcus sipped his coffee, scanning the tree line that surrounded their property, something caught his eye. A thin column of smoke was rising from the dense forest about half a mile away. His first thought was a campfire, but the smoke seemed too thick and black for that. Living in wildfire country had made him sensitive to any signs of potential danger. He grabbed his binoculars from the kitchen drawer and focused on the source of the smoke. Through the trees, he could make out what appeared to be metal debris scattered across a small clearing. His heart began to race as the reality hit him. This was no campfire. Something had crashed in those woods. Marcus quickly woke Emma and explained that he needed to investigate something in the forest. Being a responsible parent, he called his neighbor Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had become like a grandmother to Emma. She agreed to watch the little girl while he went to investigate. Armed with a first aid kit, water, and his cell phone, though service was spotty in this area, Marcus set out through the woods. The October morning was growing warmer, but the canopy of pine and aspen trees kept the forest floor cool and shadowed. As he hiked toward the crash site, his mind raced with possibilities. A small plane, perhaps, or maybe a helicopter from one of the nearby search and rescue operations. The closer he got, the more evident it became that this was serious. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with smoke filled the air, and he could hear the occasional pop and crackle of cooling metal. Broken branches and torn metal created a path of destruction through the trees, leading to the main impact site. When Marcus finally reached the clearing, the scene before him was devastating. The twisted wreckage of what had once been a medical helicopter lay scattered across the forest floor. The aircraft's red and white paint scheme was still visible on some pieces, along with a partially readable medical cross symbol. This had been a life flight helicopter, probably transporting a patient to one of the larger hospitals in Denver. Marcus approached cautiously, knowing that aviation fuel could ignite at any moment. The main body of the helicopter had come to rest against a large boulder. Its rotor blades snapped and twisted like broken arms. The cockpit was severely damaged, and he could see that the pilot's seat was empty. Either the pilot had been thrown clear during the crash, or had managed to escape. As he circled the wreckage, calling out to see if anyone was alive, Marcus heard a faint sound. It was barely audible over the settling metal and his own breathing, but it sounded like a human voice. He stopped and listened intently, his heart pounding. There it was again, a weak cry for help coming from the rear section of the helicopter. Marcus carefully climbed over some debris and peered into what remained of the aircraft's cabin. Inside, partially pinned under a piece of equipment, he could see a figure in a flight suit. The person's helmet had been knocked off, revealing shoulder-length brown hair and a woman's face, pale but conscious. "Hey, can you hear me?" Marcus called out, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm here to help. My name is Marcus." The woman's eyes fluttered open, and she looked at him with a mixture of relief and pain. "Thank God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought no one would find us." "Us?" Marcus asked, looking around the cabin more carefully. "Is there someone else here?" The woman tried to move but winced in pain. "The pilot, Jake, he was thrown from the aircraft. Check outside, please." "And the patient?" She trailed off, closing her eyes as a wave of pain washed over her. Marcus quickly surveyed the immediate area around the helicopter and found the pilot about 20 feet away, clearly deceased from the impact. His heart sank as he returned to the woman in the wreckage. He couldn't see any sign of a patient, which meant either they had been thrown farther from the crash site or there hadn't been one aboard after all. "What's your name?" Marcus asked as he carefully assessed her injuries. She appeared to have a leg trapped under debris, and there was blood on her flight suit, though he couldn't determine the source. "Officer Janet Mills," she replied, opening her eyes again. I'm I was a flight medic with the Colorado State Police Aviation Unit. She paused, seeming to struggle with her memory. We were transporting someone important, someone who needed protection. Marcus frowned. This wasn't a typical medical helicopter after all, but a police aircraft. What kind of protection? Were you in some kind of danger? Janet's eyes focused on him with sudden intensity. You need to understand something, she said urgently, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. This wasn't an accident. Someone shot us down, and they'll be coming to make sure there are no survivors. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Shot down? Who would shoot down a police helicopter and why? Are you sure? Maybe it was just mechanical failure. I saw the muzzle flash from the ground, Janet insisted, her voice growing stronger despite her obvious pain. 2 shots, maybe 3. Hit our tail rotor. We went into an uncontrollable spin. She looked around nervously. How long have I been here? What time is it? Marcus checked his watch. It's almost 9:30. I saw the smoke from my cabin about an hour ago. Janet's face went pale. They'll be here soon then. They'll want to confirm we're all dead, and when they find out we're not. She grabbed his arm again. You need to get me out of here. There's something I have to tell someone. Something important about what we were carrying. The urgency in her voice convinced Marcus that whatever had happened here was far more serious than a simple helicopter crash. As he began to work on freeing her from the debris, he couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet life in the mountains was about to change forever. Marcus worked frantically to free Janet from the twisted metal that pinned her leg. The piece of equipment that had trapped her was heavier than it looked, and every time he tried to lift it, she cried out in pain. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air as he searched for leverage. There's a crowbar in my emergency kit, Janet gasped, pointing toward a scattered pile of equipment near the helicopter's door. Red canvas bag. Marcus found the bag and quickly retrieved the crowbar. Using a piece of debris as a fulcrum, he managed to lift the equipment enough for Janet to pull her leg free. Her flight suit was torn and her leg was clearly injured, but she was mobile. We need to move, Janet said, struggling to stand. They could be here any minute. Who exactly are they? Marcus asked, helping her to her feet. And what's so important about what you were carrying? Janet leaned heavily on his shoulder as they began to move away from the wreckage. We were transporting a witness, she explained, breathing heavily. A woman named Christina Valdez. She was going to testify in a federal case against a major drug trafficking operation. We were taking her to a safe house in Denver. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Where is she now? That's the problem, Janet replied, scanning the forest around them. She wasn't in the helicopter when I regained consciousness. Either she was thrown clear during the crash, or she didn't finish the sentence. But Marcus understood the implication. They made their way slowly through the trees, with Janet limping badly on her injured leg. Marcus kept looking back over his shoulder, expecting to see armed men emerging from the forest at any moment. The morning that had started so peacefully now felt like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Tell me about this witness, Marcus said, as they paused for Janet to rest against a large pine tree. What did she know that was worth shooting down a helicopter? Janet's expression grew grim. Christina worked as a bookkeeper for what she thought was a legitimate import business. Turned out to be a front for one of the largest cocaine distribution networks in the western United States. When she discovered the truth, she copied files, bank records, everything. The information she had would have put away at least a dozen major players, including some people you wouldn't expect. What do you mean? Politicians, judges, law enforcement officials. People who were being paid to look the other way, or actively helping the operation. Christina's testimony wasn't just about drug dealers, it was about corruption that went all the way to the top. Marcus helped Janet continue walking, his mind racing. So someone with enough power and resources to shoot down a police helicopter wanted to stop her from testifying. Exactly. And now she's either dead or captured, and I'm the only one who knows what really happened here. Janet stopped walking and grabbed Marcus's arm. That's why I need your help. I have to get word to my supervisors, to the FBI agents handling the case. They need to know the operation has been compromised. They had been walking for about 15 minutes when Marcus heard the sound that made his blood run cold. The distant rumble of vehicles approaching through the forest. Multiple engines moving slowly but deliberately in their direction. Hide, Janet whispered urgently, pulling him behind a fallen log. They crouched in the undergrowth, listening as the sounds grew closer. Through the trees, Marcus could see flashes of dark-colored SUVs making their way along what must be an old logging road he hadn't known existed. The vehicles stopped somewhere near the crash site, and Marcus could hear doors slamming, followed by voices. The men were speaking in low tones, but occasionally a word carried on the morning air. They were searching for something, or someone. "They're looking for Christina," Janet whispered in his ear, "and checking to make sure we're all dead." After what felt like an eternity, they heard the vehicles starting up again. But instead of leaving, the engines seemed to be splitting up, some heading in different directions through the forest. "They're spreading out to search," Marcus realized. "We can't stay here." Janet nodded, wincing as she tried to put weight on her injured leg. "My cabin's about 2 miles east of here," Marcus continued. "We can call for help from there." "No," Janet said firmly. "We can't trust anyone right now. For all we know, someone in law enforcement tipped them off about the transport. That's probably how they knew exactly where and when to attack us." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Then what do we do?" "I have a contact," Janet said. "Someone I trust completely, FBI agent Sarah Chen. She's been working this case from the beginning, and she's the only one I know for certain isn't compromised. But I need to reach her without going through official channels." They began moving again, this time heading north toward higher ground where Marcus knew there was better cell phone reception. Janet's injury was slowing them down significantly, and the sound of engines could still be heard in the distance, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. "Tell me about your daughter," Janet said as they walked, clearly trying to distract herself from the pain. "Emma, right?" Marcus looked at her in surprise. "How did you know her name?" "You mentioned it when you were trying to free me from the wreckage. You seemed worried about getting back to her." "She's 8, Marcus replied, helping Janet over a fallen tree. "Lost her mother 2 years ago. It's just been the two of us since then." "I'm sorry," Janet said sincerely. "That must have been difficult." "It was. Still is sometimes. But we manage." Marcus paused. "I'm sorry I got us both into this situation. I should have just called 911 when I saw the smoke." "And what?" Janet asked. "Let them kill me and cover up what really happened. You saved my life, Marcus. And maybe if we can get word to Agent Chen, we can save Christina too, assuming she's still alive." They climbed higher into the mountains, following game trails that Marcus had learned during his 2 years of living in the area. The October sun was getting higher, and despite the cool air, both of them were sweating from the exertion and stress. When they finally reached a rocky outcropping that Marcus knew had decent cell coverage, Janet tried her phone. Nothing. Marcus tried his with the same result. "The mountains block signals from most directions," Marcus explained. "But sometimes if you get just the right spot." He led her to the highest point of the outcropping and held his phone up, slowly turning in different directions. Finally, he got one bar of signal. "Call Agent Chen," Janet said, reciting a phone number from memory. "Tell her Officer Janet Mills needs immediate extraction, and that Operation Safe Harbor has been compromised." Marcus dialed the number, his hands shaking slightly. After several rings, a woman's voice answered. "Chen. Agent Chen, this is Marcus Thompson. I have Officer Janet Mills with me. She says Operation Safe Harbor has been compromised and she needs immediate extraction." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Put Janet on the phone." Marcus handed the phone to Janet, who took it with obvious relief. "Sarah, thank God. Listen, we were shot down. Jake's dead and Christina Valdez is missing. Someone leaked the transport details." Marcus could only hear Janet's side of the conversation, but it was clear that Agent Chen was taking the situation seriously. Janet gave their approximate location and described what had happened. "How long?" Janet asked. "Then, okay, we'll stay hidden until then." She hung up and handed the phone back to Marcus. "She's coming personally with a tactical team. 2 hours, maybe 3. We need to find somewhere safe to wait." As if on cue, they heard the distant sound of engines again, closer than before. Someone was systematically searching the forest, and it was only a matter of time before they would be found. Marcus led Janet away from the exposed rocky outcropping toward a series of caves he had discovered during his hiking explorations. The sound of vehicles seemed to be getting closer, and he could occasionally hear voices carried on the wind. Their pursuers were being methodical, and Marcus realized they probably had experience in search operations. "There's a cave system about half a mile from here," Marcus whispered, as they made their way through the dense underbrush. It's well hidden and there are multiple exits if we need them. Janet was struggling more with each step, her injured leg clearly causing significant pain. I don't think I can make it much further, she admitted, leaning heavily against a tree. Marcus looked back the way they had come, then at Janet's pale face. She was losing blood, and the shock of the crash combined with the physical exertion was taking its toll. Okay, there's an old hunting blind closer than the caves. It's not ideal, but it'll give us cover and a chance for you to rest. The hunting blind was a weathered wooden structure built into the side of a hill, camouflaged with branches and designed to be invisible to wildlife. Marcus had stumbled across it during one of his early explorations of the area. It was clearly abandoned, with spider webs covering the small windows and leaves scattered across the floor. Inside, Janet finally allowed herself to collapse onto the wooden bench that ran along one wall. Marcus examined her leg more carefully in the dim light filtering through the blind's observation slots. Her flight suit was soaked with blood, and the wound looked deeper than he had initially thought. I need to put pressure on this, Marcus said, pulling off his jacket. You're losing too much blood. As he worked to fashion a makeshift bandage, Janet continued talking, seeming to need to get the information out before she lost consciousness. Christina Valdez isn't just any witness, she said through gritted teeth. She's the key to bringing down an operation that's been running for over 5 years. The money trail she documented shows payments to at least 3 judges, 2 district attorneys, and a handful of police officials. How did she manage to copy all this information without anyone knowing? Marcus asked, trying to distract her from the pain as he tightened the improvised tourniquet. She was smart about it, took photos with her phone over several months, always making sure she had legitimate reasons to access the files. When she finally realized the scope of what she was dealing with, she knew her life was in danger. That's when she contacted the FBI. Through the small windows of the blind, Marcus could see movement in the forest below them. 3 men in tactical gear were slowly making their way through the trees, clearly following some kind of trail. They moved with military precision, communicating through hand signals. They're professionals, Janet observed, having noticed them too. This isn't some hastily organized operation. These people have been planning for the possibility that something like this might happen. Marcus watched as the men continued their search pattern. They were systematic, but seemed to be working on the assumption that any survivors would head toward the nearest road or town. Their current path would take them about 200 yards away from the hunting blind. Tell me more about Agent Chen, Marcus whispered. How do you know you can trust her? Sarah and I went through the academy together, Janet replied quietly. We've worked several cases involving police corruption over the years. She's the one who recruited me for this particular assignment, because she knew I had the medical training and the helicopter experience they needed. This was a special assignment? I'm usually based out of Colorado Springs, but Sarah requested me specifically for this transport. The plan was to keep Christina's location secret until the last possible moment, then move her quickly to the safe house. Only a handful of people knew the route and timing. Marcus felt a chill as the implications became clear. So whoever leaked the information had to be someone with high-level access. Exactly. Which is why we can't trust anyone except Sarah right now. The men below had passed by their location and were continuing their search further up the mountain. Marcus allowed himself to relax slightly, but Janet grabbed his arm. There's something else, she said urgently. Something I haven't told you. Christina isn't the only copy of that information. What do you mean? Before she was scheduled to testify, she gave Agent Chen a backup drive containing everything. But Christina was paranoid about even that not being safe enough. She told me during the flight that she had hidden another complete copy somewhere that only she knew about. Marcus stared at her. So even if they kill Christina and destroy whatever she had with her, the information still exists. Which means they'll keep looking until they find it. And they'll eliminate anyone who might know where it is. Including us. Including us, Janet confirmed grimly. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the forest sounds and trying to detect any signs of their pursuers. Marcus found himself thinking about Emma, safely at Mrs. Patterson's house, probably wondering when her father would return. He had promised her they would work on her school project that afternoon, something about Colorado wildlife that now seemed trivial compared to their current situation. You're thinking about your daughter, Janet observed. Marcus nodded. I never imagined something like this when I moved out here. I just wanted a quiet place to raise her. away from all the chaos and danger of city life. Sometimes danger finds us no matter where we try to hide, Janet said softly. But you did the right thing helping me, and we're going to get through this. The sound of a helicopter in the distance made both of them tense up, but this one had a different sound than the police aircraft that had crashed. Marcus peered out through one of the observation slots and could see a sleek black helicopter circling the area where they had found Janet's crashed aircraft. That's not one of ours, Janet said, having heard it too. Probably belongs to whoever shot us down. They're making sure they didn't miss anything. The helicopter hovered over the crash site for several minutes before beginning to expand its search pattern. Marcus realized that from the air, their hiding place might not be as secure as he had thought. We need to move deeper into the cave system, he decided. This blind is too exposed from above. Janet nodded, though she looked exhausted. How much longer until Agent Chen arrives? Marcus checked his phone, though there was no signal this deep in the forest. Based on when you called her, probably another hour and a half. As they prepared to leave the hunting blind, Janet grabbed Marcus's arm one more time. Before we go, there's something else you need to know. Something about why they were so desperate to stop Christina from testifying. What? The operation wasn't just about drug trafficking. Christina discovered that they were also involved in human trafficking. Young women, mostly from Mexico and Central America, brought across the border under the pretense of drug smuggling operations, then sold into forced labor and prostitution. Marcus felt sick. How many people are we talking about? According to Christina's records, dozens every month. The drug trafficking was profitable, but the human trafficking was where the real money was. And some of the people involved... Janet paused, looking nauseated. Some of them were using the victims themselves. The sound of the helicopter was getting closer, and Marcus could see that it was now flying a grid pattern that would eventually bring it directly over their location. There was no more time to talk. Come on, he said, helping Janet to her feet. We need to reach those caves now. As they left the hunting blind, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into an even more dangerous situation. But with armed men searching the forest and a helicopter overhead, they had no choice but to keep moving and hope that Agent Chen would arrive before their pursuers found them. The entrance to the cave system was hidden behind a curtain of thick mountain laurel bushes, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Marcus had discovered it accidentally 6 months ago while tracking a wounded deer, and he had never mentioned its existence to anyone. As they pushed through the vegetation, Janet was barely able to stay on her feet. Just a little further, Marcus encouraged, supporting most of her weight as they squeezed through the narrow opening. Inside, the cave opened into a larger chamber with several tunnels leading deeper into the mountain. Marcus had only explored the first chamber before, but he knew from the airflow that the system was extensive. More importantly, it would be impossible to spot from the helicopter, and the multiple passages would make it difficult for ground searchers to trap them. Janet collapsed onto the sandy floor of the cave, breathing heavily. Her improvised bandage was soaked through with blood, and Marcus knew she needed medical attention soon. Tell me about the tunnels, she said weakly. Where do they lead? I don't know, Marcus admitted. I've never gone very far into the system. But there's definitely airflow from that passage, he pointed to the largest tunnel, which means it connects to at least one other opening. Outside, they could hear the helicopter making another pass overhead. The sound echoed strangely in the cave, but Marcus was confident they were completely hidden from aerial surveillance. As Janet rested, Marcus explored the entrance tunnel a bit more carefully. About 50 feet from the main chamber, he discovered something that made his heart race. Fresh footprints in the sandy cave floor. Someone else had been here recently, and the tracks led deeper into the mountain. He returned to Janet with this disturbing news. Someone else has used this cave system recently. The tracks are maybe a day or two old. Janet's eyes widened with understanding. Christina. If she survived the crash and was trying to hide, she might have found this place the same way we did. But if she's here, why didn't she answer when we called out? Maybe she's unconscious, or maybe she's being cautious. After what happened, she'd be terrified of anyone she didn't recognize. Marcus considered this. Should we follow the tracks? Yes, but carefully. If Christina is alive, she's probably armed and scared. And if those tracks belong to someone else... Janet didn't need to finish the thought. Using the flashlight app on his phone sparingly to conserve battery, Marcus led the way deeper into the cave system. Janet leaned heavily on his shoulder, her breathing becoming more labored with each step. The tunnel sloped downward and curved to the right, opening into an even larger chamber. Here, Marcus found more evidence of recent human presence, a small pile of airline snack packages and an empty water bottle. There were also drag marks in the sandy floor as if someone injured had been moving through the area. "Christina," Janet whispered. "These are airline snacks from the helicopter. She must have grabbed them before or after the crash." They followed the drag marks to another passage, this one narrower and leading upward. Marcus was beginning to worry about Janet's condition. She was pale and cold to the touch, clear signs of blood loss and shock. "I need to rest," Janet admitted, sinking down beside a large rock formation. As Marcus helped her get comfortable, he heard something that made his blood freeze, voices echoing faintly through the cave system. Someone else was in the tunnels, and they were searching systematically. "They found the cave," Marcus whispered. Janet tried to stand but couldn't manage it. "You need to go find Christina," she said urgently. "I'll only slow you down, and someone needs to warn her that they're coming. I'm not leaving you here. You have to. If they find me, I'll try to convince them that I'm the only survivor, and I don't know anything about Christina's location. But if they find both of us together, they'll know we've been in contact." Marcus realized she was right. But the idea of abandoning an injured woman to face armed killers alone went against every instinct he had. "Take this," Janet said, pulling something from her jacket pocket. It was a small recording device. "I activated it when we first started talking at the crash site. Everything we've discussed about the operation, the corruption, the human trafficking, it's all recorded here. What am I supposed to do with it?" "Give it to Agent Chen when she arrives. If something happens to me, this device contains the only first-hand account of what really happened to our helicopter and why." The voices in the cave were getting closer, and Marcus could hear equipment being moved around. Their pursuers were being thorough, checking every passage and chamber. "Go," Janet insisted. "Follow those drag marks and find Christina. If she's alive, you need to get her to safety." Marcus took the recording device and started to leave, then turned back. "What's your daughter's name?" Janet looked confused by the question. "You mentioned her earlier," Marcus explained. "When you were talking about understanding how I felt about Emma, you said you knew what it was like to worry about a child." Janet's expression softened. "Amy, she's 6, lives with my ex-husband in Denver." Tears formed in her eyes. "If I don't make it out of here, tell Agent Chen to make sure Amy knows her mother died, trying to protect innocent people." Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He squeezed her shoulder once and then headed deeper into the cave system, following the drag marks by the dim light of his phone. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes opening into larger chambers, sometimes narrowing so much that Marcus had to crawl. The drag marks continued consistently, showing that whoever had made them was determined and heading towards some specific destination. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Marcus saw light ahead, not electric light, but natural daylight filtering in from somewhere. The passage was leading to another entrance to the cave system. As he got closer to the light source, he could hear something that made him stop and listen carefully. It was the sound of someone crying softly, trying to muffle the sound. Marcus turned off his phone light and crept forward in the natural light. The passage opened into a small chamber with an opening that looked out over a steep valley. Sitting near the opening, her back to him, was a young woman with dark hair. She was wearing civilian clothes that were torn and dirty, and she was clearly injured. "Christina?" Marcus called out softly. The woman spun around and Marcus found himself looking down the barrel of a small handgun. Her face was bruised, her left arm was in an improvised sling, and her eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking but determined. "How do you know my name?" Marcus raised his hand slowly. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I found Officer Janet Mills at the helicopter crash site. She's been telling me about what happened to you, about what you were going to testify about." Christina's grip on the gun didn't waver. "Prove it. Tell me something only Janet would know," Marcus thought quickly. "She said you told her during the flight that you had hidden another complete copy of the evidence somewhere that only you knew about. She also said the operation involved human trafficking as well as drugs." Christina's expression changed from suspicion to desperate hope. "Is Janet alive? What happened to Jake?" "Janet's alive but injured badly. Jake, Marcus shook his head. I'm sorry. Christina lowered the gun and began crying again. This is all my fault. If I hadn't gotten involved, if I had just kept my mouth shut. No, Marcus said firmly, moving closer. This is the fault of the people running the operation, not yours. You're trying to do the right thing. The right thing? Christina laughed bitterly. The right thing got Jake killed and Janet hurt, and now they're going to kill all of us to keep their secret safe. Marcus sat down beside her, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. Agent Chen is coming with a tactical team, Janet called her. We just need to stay hidden until help arrives. Christina looked out at the valley below. You don't understand. These people have resources, connections, money. They've been planning for something like this. Even if we survive today, they'll never stop hunting us. As if to emphasize her point, they both heard the sound of voices echoing from the cave system behind them. Their pursuers had found the passage and were following the same trail Marcus had taken. There's another way out, Christina said, pointing to a narrow ledge that ran along the cliff face outside the cave opening. I was about to try it when you showed up. It leads to a trail that goes down into the valley. Marcus looked at the ledge and felt his stomach drop. It was barely wide enough for one person, with a sheer drop of several hundred feet to the rocks below. In your condition? He asked, noticing how she favored her injured arm. Do we have a choice? The ledge was even more treacherous than it had appeared from inside the cave. Marcus went first, testing each step carefully while Christina followed close behind. Her injured arm made it difficult for her to maintain balance, and Marcus found himself constantly reaching back to steady her. Below them, the valley floor seemed impossibly far away, dotted with jagged rocks and fallen trees. One wrong step would mean certain death. But the voices behind them were getting closer, and they could hear flashlight beams searching the cave chamber they had just left. Almost there, Marcus whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to encourage Christina or himself. The ledge widened slightly as it curved around a rocky outcropping, and he could see where it connected to what appeared to be an old mining trail cut into the mountainside. Just as Christina was about to step onto the wider section of the ledge, her foot slipped on loose gravel. Marcus lunged backward and caught her wrist just as she started to fall, but the sudden movement caused him to lose his own balance. For a terrifying moment, they both teetered on the edge of the precipice. I've got you, Marcus said through gritted teeth, pulling Christina back to safety. They both pressed themselves against the rock wall, breathing heavily. Thank you, Christina whispered, tears in her eyes. I thought I was going to die. We're not out of this yet, Marcus replied, listening to the sounds coming from the cave behind them. Their pursuers had found the chamber and were discussing something in low voices. They continued along the ledge more carefully, finally reaching the old mining trail. It was overgrown with vegetation but still passable, and it led downward into the valley at a reasonable angle. More importantly, it would be invisible from the cave opening they had just left. As they made their way down the trail, Christina began to tell Marcus more about what had led to this moment. She explained how she had discovered the true nature of her employer's business when she noticed discrepancies in shipping manifests and payment records. At first, I thought it was just tax evasion or money laundering, she said, carefully navigating around a fallen log. But when I started digging deeper, I found records of payments to trucking companies that didn't exist, warehouses that were registered to dead people, and bank transfers that went to accounts in names I recognized from the news. What kind of names? Marcus asked, helping her over a particularly difficult section of the trail. Local politicians, judges, even some federal agents. The money trail was like a roadmap to corruption throughout the entire region. Christina paused to catch her breath, but the worst part was when I found the personnel files. Marcus felt a chill.
Personnel files for what?
For the women they were trafficking. Ages, physical descriptions, medical information, even photos. They were being treated like inventory in a warehouse. Her voice broke as she continued. Some of the files showed girls as young as 14. They had reached a relatively flat section of the trail that provided some cover behind large boulders. Marcus suggested they rest there and try to make contact with Agent Chen again. His phone still showed no signal, but he hoped that as they got lower in elevation, they might find better coverage. There's something else, Christina said, as they sat in the shadow of the rocks. Something I haven't told anyone, not even Agent Chen. Marcus looked at her expectantly. I know where they're keeping some of the women. There's a compound about 30 miles from here, disguised as a private ranch. I saw delivery records, supply shipments, even payroll information for guards and caretakers. How many women? Based on the supply orders and other records, I estimate at least 50, maybe more. And they're not just being held there temporarily. Some of the files showed women who had been at the ranch for over a year. Marcus felt sick thinking about the implications. We need to tell Agent Chen about this when she arrives. If she arrives, Christina said grimly. And if we're still alive when she does. They resumed their descent down the mining trail, moving as quickly as Christina's injuries would allow. The trail switched back down the mountainside, providing occasional views of the valley below. Marcus was relieved to see that there were no signs of their pursuers following them. At least not yet. After another hour of hiking, they reached the bottom of the valley where a small creek ran through a grove of aspen trees. The setting was peaceful, a stark contrast to the danger they were fleeing. Christina sat down beside the creek and splashed cold water on her face. I need to tell you something about the backup copy of the evidence, she said suddenly. The one I hid. Marcus waited for her to continue. It's not hidden in some random location. I gave it to someone I trust, someone who doesn't know what it contains. Christina looked directly at him. I gave it to my younger sister, Maria. She thinks it's just a backup of my personal files. Where is Maria now? She's a college student in Denver. Lives in an apartment near the university campus. Christina's expression grew worried. If these people find out about the backup, they'll go after her too. She has no idea how much danger she's in. Marcus checked his phone again and was surprised to see that he now had 2 bars of signal. I'm going to try calling Agent Chen, he said. The phone rang several times before Agent Chen answered. Marcus, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for over an hour. We had to leave the original location, Marcus explained quickly. Armed men were searching the area, and there was a helicopter. We're now in a valley about 3 miles southeast of the crash site. Are you both okay? Marcus looked at Christina, who was pale and clearly exhausted but alert. Christina is injured but mobile. Officer Mills. He paused, realizing he didn't know Janet's current status. We had to leave her in the cave system. She was too badly hurt to continue. I have a team moving to your original coordinates now, Agent Chen said. Can you give me a more specific location for where you are currently? Marcus described the valley, the creek, and the mining trail they had used to descend from the caves. Agent Chen told him she would send a helicopter to extract them within the next 30 minutes. There's something else, Marcus said. Christina has information about a ranch where they're holding trafficking victims. She also gave a backup of all her evidence to her sister in Denver. Put Christina on the phone. Marcus handed the phone to Christina, who quickly explained about the ranch and her sister's situation. Agent Chen assured her that teams were already being dispatched to secure both locations. After hanging up, they settled down to wait for extraction, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal wasn't over yet. The people behind this operation had shown they were willing to shoot down a police helicopter to protect their secrets. They wouldn't give up easily, even with federal agents closing in. As if summoned by his thoughts, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the valley. But as the aircraft came into view, Marcus realized it wasn't the FBI helicopter they were expecting. It was the same black helicopter they had seen earlier, and it was heading directly toward their location. Run, Christina said, struggling to her feet. They found us. Marcus helped her up, and they began moving toward the tree line as the helicopter circled overhead. Through the aircraft's open door, Marcus could see armed men preparing to fast rope down into the valley. They had mere minutes before they would be surrounded, and Christina could barely walk. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of running deeper into the wilderness where they would eventually be caught, he led Christina toward what looked like an abandoned mining building he had spotted earlier. If they were going to make a stand, they would need cover and a defensible position, and Marcus hoped that Agent Chen's team would arrive before it was too late. The abandoned mining building was more substantial than Marcus had hoped. Built into the hillside with thick stone walls and small windows, it had been designed to withstand the harsh mountain weather. Most importantly, it had only one main entrance, which would make it easier to defend. Inside, the building was filled with rusted equipment and debris from decades of abandonment, but the structure was still sound. Marcus quickly surveyed their surroundings while Christina collapsed against one of the stone walls. exhausted from their desperate flight across the valley floor. "There's a back room," Marcus reported after a quick exploration. "No windows, but there might be another way out through what looks like a ventilation shaft." Christina nodded weakly. "How long do we have?" Through the small front window, Marcus could see men rappelling from the black helicopter, which had landed in the meadow about 200 yards away. "Not long. Maybe 5 minutes." Christina reached into her jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. "This contains copies of some of the most important files," she said, pressing it into Marcus's hand. "If something happens to me, make sure Agent Chen gets this." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Marcus replied firmly. But he pocketed the drive nonetheless. The sound of boots on gravel outside told them their pursuers had reached the building. Marcus could hear voices coordinating their approach, professional and methodical. These weren't street criminals or desperate amateurs. They were trained operatives who knew exactly what they were doing. "Christina Valdez," a voice called out from outside. "We know you're in there. Come out now and we'll make this quick and painless." Marcus and Christina exchanged glances. There was something chillingly matter-of-fact about the way the man had spoken, as if he was simply conducting routine business. "We also know there's a civilian with you," the voice continued. "Marcus Thompson, resident of 1247 Pine Ridge Road. You have a daughter named Emma who's currently staying with your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The fact that they knew Emma's name and location meant these people had resources and information networks that went far beyond what he had imagined. His worst fear was that his decision to help Janet had put his daughter in danger. "Mr. Thompson," the voice called again, "you've gotten involved in something that doesn't concern you. Walk away now and your daughter stays safe. Stay and we can't guarantee her protection." "Don't listen to him," Christina whispered urgently. "They're going to kill us both regardless of what you do. And if they think you know too much about their operation..." Marcus understood. If he walked away, he would still be a loose end that needed to be eliminated. And they had shown they were willing to threaten Emma to control his actions. Through the window, he could see men positioning themselves around the building. They were preparing for either a negotiation or an assault, and Marcus suspected they preferred the latter option. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Agent Chen, Marcus, where are you?" "We're in the valley, but we can't locate you." "We're in an old mining building on the north side of the valley," Marcus whispered into the phone. "Armed men have us surrounded. They threaten my daughter. Stay on the line. We have eyes on the black helicopter now. Keep your heads down. We're moving in." Through the small window, Marcus could see flashes of movement in the tree line beyond the meadow. Agent Chen's tactical team was taking positions, but he wasn't sure they would be in time to prevent an assault on the building. "Last chance, Ms. Valdez," the voice outside called out. "We know you don't have the only copy of those files. Tell us where the backup is and we'll make sure your death is quick." "Never," Christina called back, her voice stronger than Marcus had expected. The response was immediate and violent. The windows exploded inward as tear gas canisters were thrown into the building. Marcus grabbed Christina and pulled her toward the back room he had discovered earlier, covering their faces with their shirts as best they could. The rear room provided some shelter from the gas, but Marcus knew it was only temporary. Through the main room, he could hear men entering the building, their boots crunching on broken glass. "The ventilation shaft," Christina gasped, pointing to a square opening in the wall about 6 feet off the ground. "Can we get through it?" Marcus examined the shaft. It was narrow but might be passable for someone Christina's size. For him, it would be a tight squeeze, but it was their only option. He boosted Christina up to the opening and she managed to pull herself inside despite her injured arm. Marcus followed, the metal shaft barely accommodating his broader shoulders. The shaft led upward and then horizontal, presumably toward an external ventilation outlet. As they crawled through the cramped space, Marcus could hear voices and movement in the building below them. Their absence had been discovered, and their pursuers were searching methodically. After what felt like an eternity of crawling through the narrow shaft, they reached what appeared to be an external grating. Marcus pushed against it, and to his relief, it opened easily. They were on the hillside behind the building, about 15 feet above ground level. "I'll go first and help you down," Marcus whispered. He squeezed through the opening and dropped to the ground, landing hard but uninjured. Christina followed, and Marcus caught her as she fell, both of them trying to make as little noise as possible. They were behind the building now, but still exposed on the hillside. Marcus could see muzzle flashes in the forest as Agent Chen's team engaged the men who had been surrounding the building. The sound of automatic weapons fire echoed through the valley. "This way," Marcus said, leading Christina toward a cluster of large boulders that would provide cover. They had made it about halfway to the rocks when a figure stepped out from behind a tree, pointing an assault rifle at them. Marcus recognized him as one of the men who had rappelled from the helicopter. "That's far enough," the man said calmly. "Both of you hands up." As Marcus raised his hands, he noticed the movement behind the gunman. A figure in tactical gear was approaching silently through the trees, weapon raised. "You know," the gunman continued conversationally, "this whole situation could have been avoided if Ms. Valdez had just minded her own business. Now we have to clean up a very messy situation." The shot came from behind him, and the gunman collapsed without another word. Agent Sarah Chen emerged from the tree line, her weapon still trained on the fallen man. "Are you both all right?" she asked, quickly checking them for injuries. "We're okay," Marcus replied, though his heart was still racing. "What about Officer Mills?" "We found her in the cave system. She's alive and being evacuated for medical treatment." Agent Chen looked at Christina. "She gave us the recording device you made, plus some additional information about the ranch you mentioned." "My sister," Christina said urgently. "Is she safe?" "We have a team with her now. She's fine, and she gave us the backup drive you left with her." Agent Chen smiled grimly. "We have everything we need to bring down this entire operation." As they made their way back toward the main part of the valley where FBI helicopters were landing, Marcus felt a profound sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. It was over. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we arrest everyone involved, shut down their operations, and rescue the women they were trafficking." Agent Chen replied, "Thanks to you and Christina, we have enough evidence to prosecute dozens of people and save dozens of lives." 3 days later, Marcus was back in his cabin with Emma, trying to return to some semblance of normal life. The story had made national news and reporters had been calling constantly, but Marcus had declined all interviews. He just wanted to focus on his daughter and try to process everything that had happened. Christina had been placed in witness protection until the trials were completed, but she had called to thank him one last time. Officer Janet Mills was recovering in a Denver hospital and was expected to make a full recovery. The ranch had been raided, and 53 women had been rescued and were receiving medical care and counseling. Most importantly, Emma was safe, and the people who had threatened her were now in federal custody. As Marcus tucked Emma into bed that night, she looked up at him with the serious expression she sometimes got when she was thinking about grown-up things. "Dad, Mrs. Patterson said you helped save some people who were in trouble." "I did what anyone would have done," Marcus replied. "Are you a hero now?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think heroes are just regular people who choose to help when someone needs it, even when it's scary or dangerous." Emma smiled. "Then yes, you're a hero." As Marcus turned off the light and headed to his own room, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few days. He had come to the mountains seeking peace and isolation, but sometimes the most important thing you can do is get involved, even when it puts you at risk. Outside, the mountain night was quiet and peaceful once again, but Marcus knew he would never take that peace for granted, and he knew that if he ever saw smoke rising from the forest again, he wouldn't hesitate to investigate, because sometimes a single person's decision to help can make all the difference in the world.